And good Sunday morning to you. I'm James Brierton from the Carolina Weather Group. Thanks so much for joining us for our continuing updates on Hurricane Irma. We're going to be taking a look here over the course of the next few minutes at the 11 o'clock Eastern update. Just in from the National Hurricane Center, we are tracking this very powerful storm that you were looking at just moments ago on satellite here. You can see the eye of that storm not too long ago crossed over the Keys of Florida, where it did make its first official mainland USA landfall. And we're going to watch here for the eye of that storm to possibly be making another landfall in the next few hours in the mainland of Florida, and everyone from Tallahassee through Tampa back down into the Fort Myers area and all the way to the Keys are keeping a very close eye on this, because any one of those locations are possible here for this eye to be coming ashore in the next little bit. But as of 11 a.m. Eastern this Sunday morning, Hurricane Irma is a Category 4 storm moving northbound at 9 miles per hour with maximum sustained winds of 130 miles per hour. We have lots of new data to show you this morning, as well as an updated forecast track that really will bring this not only through the areas up and down the coastal portions of Florida, but also into portions of inland Georgia and Alabama, in for a pretty rare tropical storm warning already in effect for the Atlanta metro area. Not unheard of, but certainly not all that frequent. And let's go ahead and pop up the 11 o'clock forecast update now from the National Hurricane Center that does show the forecast for Hurricane Irma here over the course of the next few days. So the eye of the storm right now south of Fort Myers, just north of the Florida Keys, and we are quickly approaching the Everglades portion of the southern tip of Florida there. Everything that is outlined in red for most of Florida, that means that there is a hurricane warning in effect. And so we are expecting those hurricane force winds to be impacting almost every coastline of Florida here in the next 24 to 36 hours. That eye of this major hurricane will be flirting with the west coast of Florida and could make a landfall once again anywhere from the Tampa to the Fort Myers area before possibly going back out to waters there in the Gulf of Mexico. You can see that H right where it says 8 a.m. on Monday. There's an H there just back out over the waters. The reason that this is kind of hard to determine but so important is because the longer that eye stays out over water, the more time it will have to strengthen, or at least maintain a lot of its strength. Because if you'll remember watching with us on Friday and Saturday, as that eye was flirting and interacting with the coast of Cuba and the islands and mountains of Cuba, we were seeing the storm break down a little bit. So the more land friction the hurricane gets, the more it'll have the opportunity to weaken. The less land friction it gets and the more time it spends out over water, the more opportunity it will have to thrive. And so that's why we are very close, a small margin of error here in this forecast for the next 24 to 36 hours or so, but it'll be very interesting to see exactly where that eye goes, because it could determine the strength of the storm. As we look ahead to Monday, Tropical Storm Irma expected to move into the Columbus, Georgia, Auburn, Alabama metro areas by about Monday night. Keep in mind, when you're looking at this forecast cone, we've been talking about this, but I think it deserves a reminder. We're talking about the possible location of the eye of Irma, the center of that location that you were seeing just a moment ago on rotation. When we look at that forecast cone, we're talking about where that center is going to be. But just look at how wide this storm is. The eye of the storm right now still south of the mainland of Florida, and we can already see on satellite just how far the winds and the rain are reaching portions of Tampa and Melbourne and Orlando and, of course, Miami. Let's take a look at this traffic camera from Florida 511. You can see those rainy conditions there in the Florida area. This is Miami Metro, Interstate 395. We had some other traffic cameras, a lot of them offline because of the power outages currently in that area. Things a little bit drier as we look up just north of the Tampa area. This is north of the metro area, but as I move our cameras closer to the Tampa Bay waters, the Gulf of Mexico, Interstate 275 here at the Sky Bridge in the Tampa metro area, just look at the water in particular. You can see some of the white caps there in this still shot, and you can see that visibility as well too. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that. But of course, the Fort Myers area already beginning to see some of that rain moving on in. The good news in a lot of these shots that we're noticing is there's no one out on the roads, and that's very good because we hope that people either evacuated or they are in a safe spot. Here is the radar from Key West, Florida, which actually went offline as the eye made its way over Key West a little bit earlier, but the radar is back up. Again, one of the big differences between satellite and radar is ground-based. So we're actually kind of slicing through the storm. We're looking up from the ground, up at the storm, so we can kind of see lower levels of the storm. Whereas when we're looking at satellite, we're looking down from space at the top, so we can actually see a little bit more here what's impacting on the ground. And again, there is that eye, about center of your screen, right where the area of that rotation is, and you'll notice there's not a lot of rain in the center of that eye. Conditions are actually clear in the center of that eye, but it is that eye wall where we're getting the most intense winds. And again, as of the 11 o'clock update from the Hurricane Center, we are talking here about a Category 4 storm with winds sustained at about 130 miles per hour along the eye wall of that storm. So the closer you are to the eye, the more intense damage you will see, because you will have the strongest of those hurricane force winds. But again, look at the outer bands of this storm. We are still seeing lots of rain, lots of wind back across the Miami metro area, and they are 100 miles or so from the eye of that storm. And as I move the radar north into Tampa, you can also see a lot of the wind and rain that is moving through there. Now, of course, when I say wind and rain, you can't see wind necessarily on this version of the radar, but we are seeing the rain. And what you're also noticing there in the last few frames of this animation that kind of all pop up at once is that tornado threat that we've been talking about. Those are tornado warnings now for areas not only in central and western Florida, but also along the east coast of Florida. You can see on the edge of your screen there several tornado warnings in the Melbourne area. So we will be watching for those, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up on the screen right now some live radar from Radar Scope, one of the apps that you see us use fairly frequently here on the Carolina Weather Group, because what I'm able to do with this is actually pick up some of those winds we've been talking about from the radar source. This is from the Tampa perspective, and I not only want to show you the live tornado warnings right now, which include portions of the Palm Bay and Port St. Lucie area, but you can also see in the center of your screen there, I've got this little inspector tool, and I'm able to kind of move things around and peer inside the storm. Again, we are looking at winds right now, and even in the Tampa area, where they are several hundred miles still from that approaching eye, you can see estimated winds of about 70 miles per hour there over central Florida, about the same as I peer off the waters of Sarasota at this hour. But let me zoom out, let me switch radar sources, let's go down to Miami. Again, Miami, a good 100 miles or so from that eye. Matter of fact, we can actually measure that here. So from Miami downtown, or just shy of that actually in South Miami where the radar site is, we're talking about 90 miles or so. So about even 90 miles, 100 miles from the eye of that storm back towards Miami itself, we can peer into the storm once again and look at these winds. Again, these are estimated winds that the radar is picking up on the fringe of this storm. We are talking about 70, 80 mile per hour sustained winds, and even closer and stronger winds as you make your way closer into the eye of that storm. Why this is significant? For several reasons. Of course, wind is going to be the culprit for a lot of the damage we see, in addition to the amount of rain and storm surge we'll be seeing. But one of the reasons we're going to be carefully watching storm surge all up and down the coast is, as I put this into motion, you can see some of those winds blowing onshore, because we have this circulation. Remember, the eye is about here. So what that means is this is rotating this way and then back around this way. Excuse me. Why that is significant is because you're going to have the wind pushing a lot of this rain up against the coastal areas of Miami and elsewhere, not only as the eye is approaching and passing, but also later on tonight as the storm itself moves further north. We'll be watching for continued storm surge threat up and down the Florida coast, and that's why National Hurricane Center does have this really great map they issue. As it loads up on your screen here, we'll do a nice refresh for you so that you can get an idea of just how much storm surge we could potentially see. This is a new product that came out in recent years to help signify exactly that storm surge we could be seeing. And when you see that red, we're talking about more than 9 feet above regular ground level. So a lot of this right here is the Florida Everglades. So we're going to see a lot of water pushed up to the Everglades. Luckily, there is not a lot of population there, but what we are watching very closely is places like Naples and Fort Myers, where you can see some of these, otherwise downtown touristy businesses areas are going to be anticipating a lot of storm surge. Just look at these reds and these oranges here, that means we're talking 3, 6, 9 plus feet of storm surge is going to be making its way not only onto and over some of these barrier islands, but also up several blocks into these neighborhoods here. And again, this is now down towards Naples. You can see this is not only a barrier island event, but also as you look closer to the mainland, you can see this will be pushing its way not only on shore, but even up some of these inlets here as we make our way into the greater Fort Myers area, if I have my bearings correct. So even folks who live further from the actual coast, but along some of these waterways, will need to watch very closely this storm surge threat. And you can see we even see that as we make our way back up towards Tallahassee. This will be an increased threat in the Tallahassee area as we go into the next 24 hours or so as Hurricane Irma makes her way north along the west coast of Florida. Let me do a quick reset here, and James Brierton with you, or there's my face, at about 11:37 a.m. on this Sunday morning. Thank you so much for joining us here as we continue to follow the latest on Hurricane Irma on our streaming platforms of the Carolina Weather Group. So many of you, of course, are watching in the Carolinas. So what does this mean for the Carolinas? Let's talk a little bit about that. At the same time, I'm looking down because I'm going to bring my phone over to the Facebook app, where I'm sure lots of you are asking questions at this hour, and I want to try to address some of those as well too. But at the same time, I want to bring up for you our friend Levi Catwin's website, tropicaltidbits.com, up on your screen right now, because Levi gives us access to some of the graphical representations of what the computer models are putting out. You hear us talk about it all the time. Well, the models say blah, 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 blah. So what does that actually mean? What does that actually convey? This is kind of, if you will, the best representation we can give of a future radar, a future observation, current events. As we peer into the future, we're looking here at the GFS model interpretation of this storm. So right here is the next hour or two as the eye either makes landfall in the Naples area or flirts with landfall in the Naples area, and then will continue its way northbound towards that Tallahassee area over Tampa. But notice something here, even as the low pressure center, that L that is on your screen there in the Georgia area, as the storm comes ashore, either as a Category 1 or a tropical storm or whatever it may be, as it makes its way up Interstate 75 into Georgia, in towards that Columbus area, and eventually into Auburn, just look at, once again, the reach of this storm. Don't get lost in looking at that cone in just the eye of the storm, because we want to talk about the effects of that storm. So right there, take a look at that. We're looking at essentially simulated radar, if you will, the simulated intensity of rain, and you can see back across portions of central Georgia and even back into parts of South Carolina, so Columbia and Charleston. We're looking at pretty intense rainfall here as we look ahead to about the Monday timeframe or so here, as the remnants of Irma, probably in the form of a tropical storm, make her way up towards Atlanta and Columbus and Auburn, and eventually up towards Birmingham and into the Tennessee area. Just look, you can see some of those outer bands of rain will make their way as far east as the Charlotte metro area. So that means if you're in the western North Carolina mountains, if you are in upstate South Carolina, if you're in Columbia, we're going to be watching for strong winds, strong rain, probably at most tropical storm force. So we're talking maybe about 40 or 50 mile per hour winds. We're not talking 100 mile per hour winds by any means, but we will be watching for some, significantly strong wind that could topple down some trees and resulting in some power outages in some locations. What is also a concern for me, and I'm going to go ahead and put the forecast cone back up because we can actually see these outlined on the cone, is we will be watching for a storm surge threat along the Georgia and South Carolina coast. So places like Hilton Head and Charleston, we're going to be watching there for the storm surge to be several feet above high tide as the storm makes its way through that Tallahassee area and through that Georgia area. If you remember a few moments ago when I was drawing on the map and showing you the storm surge threat in Miami, it's going to be a very similar situation by the time the storm makes its way up into portions portions of the southeast, such as Georgia, because with that low over Georgia, we're talking about that counterclockwise flow of winds around that low, which is once again going to be pushing the water of the Atlantic up against the southeast boundaries of Georgia and South Carolina along the coast. So if you are living along the coast in Savannah or South Carolina, you may be living in one of those evacuated areas along the coast or on barrier islands, and so that's why those officials there were asking folks to leave. And even if you don't live in an evacuation zone but do live in an area that is prone to flooding, that is certainly something to keep in mind here as we look ahead to the Monday timeframe. Tropical storm warnings are in effect there, as well as a hurricane watch, so we could be flirting with some hurricane-like conditions, but certainly expect tropical storm conditions. Again, winds there of about 40 or 50 miles per hour, especially along the South Carolina coast, but I wouldn't be surprised as we look ahead to Monday, overnight into early Tuesday, if we are seeing some bands of heavier rain and strong winds stretching back through Columbia, Greenville, Spartanburg, Asheville, western North Carolina, including the Charlotte metro area. So we will be keeping a close eye on that. We do have a new product this year that you may have been seeing on television or right here on the Carolina Weather Group. It is a cooperation between the Ohio State University, Texas A&M University, and University of Michigan. They are using this experimental model here to try to predict power outages, to try to give us a quality of life indication of what life will be like, not only in the hours after the storms, but in the days, maybe a week or so after the storm. And you can see there those orange, red, burnt colors. That's 40, 50 plus percentage of the population expected to be without power, stretching from Miami through Tampa, through Tallahassee, and this has been updated now to show the impacts of the storm towards that Atlanta metro area, but also the Columbus, Georgia, and the Auburn area, up towards the Birmingham and portions of the Montgomery metro areas, could be seeing some pretty significant power outages as we look ahead over the course of the next few days. So heads up. I know everyone here where I live in the Charlotte metro area, a week or so before the storm, were rushing out to get batteries and propane gas for the grill and water. But I also hope that folks even further inland in Alabama are also prepared, because we could see some tropical storm force conditions coming your way over the course of the next few days or so. A couple more products to show you here, as I also will be taking some of your Facebook questions in the next few minutes. Here's a product from the National Weather Service showing the amount of rain that this storm is expected to drop, not only over Florida, but into portions of Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, and into Tennessee. But, I mean, of course, our eyes jump immediately to Florida, which is in that red color, where we could be seeing 10, 15 plus inches of rain over the course of the next day or so, thanks to Hurricane Irma. Once again, here is a look at the latest satellite image. You can see the eye of that storm heading straight up your screen. It is now heading northbound at about 13 miles per hour. It has made that right-hand turn. It was previously going west, flirting with the north shore of Cuba. It has made that right-hand turn. It is heading northbound, and that means that we do have the west coast of Florida right in the bullseye here. Looking at some of our Facebook comments, thanks to Misty, who was watching. Thank you for watching this morning, Misty. And Julie watching from Morganton, North Carolina. Thank you so much, Julie. And we have a question as well. Should we be worried here in Canada? I wouldn't be so much worried in Canada for any sort of significant storm. What will happen to this low as it makes its way into the United States southeast region is it'll be absorbed with some of the other steering currents of the atmosphere. And then we could be seeing, again, some rainy conditions over the course of the week up and along the mid-Atlantic, maybe up to the northeast as it exits, but that'll be more in the form of traditional rain as the intensity, what's left over of the storm, will get absorbed by the atmosphere and work its way through. Robin is commenting on Facebook. Daughter flying into Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Monday noon. Do you see any problems with that? That will, of course, be up to the airlines to decide not only is it safe to fly, but whether or not they want to leave their airplanes in any place like Myrtle Beach, or even depending, and I'll ask this question, Robin, where is that plane coming from? Is she flying from Atlanta to Myrtle Beach? Is that plane coming to Atlanta from Florida? Because certainly there won't be flights leaving Florida, so that creates kind of an inventory problem for the airlines, if you will. So not only will we have to take into consideration the weather conditions, but also the logistics operation of the airlines. So Monday, noontime, afternoon, coming from Delaware. Okay, Robin says that plane or her daughter will be coming from Delaware. So shouldn't be too many problems up in the mid-Atlantic Delaware region as a result of the storm. I'm not a savant of airlines by any means. I, of course, say check with the airlines, but in terms of significant weather conditions, Monday noon, I think you'll probably want to check with the airlines, of course, just kind of keep an eye on things, but I think the operations there will probably be operating, but maybe watch for some weather-related delays. Another question from Russell, Anderson, South Carolina. What system will steer the hurricane west instead of north-northeast? So I'm going to bring up in just a moment, I'll bring the GFS model back up for you, Russell. We could talk a little bit about some of those steering currents here. Let me go back to tropical tidbits. Because we did have a system moving into the southeast, and that was kind of the big determining factor, if you will remember, about whether or not this storm was going to turn north and when it was going to do that. So let's go back here real fast and pull up. Let's reset this. So rewind. You can see we have Irma making her way through Florida. And if you look, we have a number of things in the atmosphere here in your screen. And actually, I will probably need to zoom this back out for you because I've got it really pushed into the southeast. But let me make a quick screen size adjustment here for you so you guys can see a little bit more of the continental United States. There it goes. So we have that high over the northeast, and we were talking about the counterclockwise rotation of the low. We have a clockwise rotation of the high, but we also have a steering current that is making its way into the southeast. Oh, good, my mouse shows up actually. I think just a little bit. You can see what those numbers are. So it was kind of pushing down this way, and so what's going to happen with Irma is as it pushes up into the southeast, it's going to begin to interact with the jet stream. So we have the traditional weather that makes its way across the United States from west to east, a little bit like a roller coaster. The currents do change a little bit, but generally speaking, it goes west to east. So what's going to happen, and you can see it here, Irma's still got a little bit of power. She's overpowering the jet stream a little bit, and she's pushing up against it and making her way from Georgia and Alabama into Tennessee. But at a certain point here, it's going to start to lose out. You can see it stalls for just a moment, and where it's fairly weak at this point, and then just kind of disappears. And then you can see those remnants, that green blob here that I got the numbers over right about there, as kind of just the remnants of the moisture, and at that point it's going to then make its way up into the northeast. It won't be a significant tropical cyclone by any means of the imagination. It's just what happens with anything that interacts in the atmosphere is eventually we'll have the leftover energy from that just kind of get dissolved into everything else that's going on and will be pushed up there. But that was one of the considerations, if you remember from the storm, back and forth, where will it go, and I actually did a blog on this on the CarolinaWeatherGroup.com website the other day, is what steers tropical cyclones, and that was a lot of what was at play there. So we'll be watching that closely to get a closer idea of where it will be. But that's why the National Weather Service, this is also refreshing here for you just to get you the latest and greatest information on your screen here. As we look across the southeast, we have a whole slew of warnings. So, of course, we have hurricane warnings up for most of Florida. All across the Keys, not only do we have a hurricane warning, and let's see if I can get it on this map, we have a fairly new and rare product. It's not showing up. You'll have to take my word for it that it's there, or it was a little bit earlier, an extreme wind warning. So as that eye of the storm made its way across the Keys, the National Weather Service issued an extreme wind warning, which means that tornadic power winds, devastating winds, were pushing their way across that area. It's a fairly new product because they want people to understand the power of those winds that were making their way up. But what I really wanted to show you as we were talking about those steering currents, Russell, is the reason that we have this tropical storm warning up for portions of Atlanta and Columbus and Macon and Albany, Georgia. Also back into portions of Alabama, just outside the Birmingham area, portions of the Montgomery area, portions of the Auburn area. But this also, of course, stretches now to the coast. Tropical storm warning stretching along the coast of South Carolina. I know we have a lot lot of folks watching locally from South Carolina, so let's push this in to get a little bit more intimate here with the coast. But you can see this does include portions of the Charleston area back down towards Hilton Head, and of course the Savannah, Georgia area. So we have that tropical storm warning, which means we are expecting those tropical storm conditions here very, very shortly. You'll notice that it just says expires until further notice. So they'll let this go probably Monday or Tuesday after that system works its way through. The other thing I wanted to point out, especially for folks who are watching in upstate South Carolina, western North Carolina, is we do have this high wind watch. So we don't have right now any sort of tropical bulletin issued, but we do have this high wind watch, which means that the outer bands of this storm will be reaching out and bringing us some pretty gusty wind conditions at times across portions of Greenville, Spartanburg, probably up into the Asheville area, and flirting with the Charlotte metro area. So we'll be watching that as well too, as I kind of just clicked through here to see a little bit of the timeline for the Greenville, Spartanburg area. If I slide this up on your screen, you can actually see that they have outlined for Monday and Tuesday night when that high wind warning will be in effect there, because once again we'll be seeing some of those gustier conditions. Okay, so here's what lies ahead over the course of the rest of the day. The National Hurricane Center is now issuing hourly advisories, giving the media and other folks updates on the strength and location of this storm. They do have a significant advisory that comes out at 2 p.m. at this point, and then at 5 p.m. as well too. We'll get a little bit updated of the forecast track, just like we did here at 11 a.m. Again, the forecast track, if you're just joining us on the streaming networks of the Carolina Weather Group, you can see that as of 11 a.m. Eastern on the Sunday morning, Hurricane Irma, just south of Florida, made a landfall with the Key West of Florida, and could be making another landfall here by the end of the day into tomorrow morning, anywhere along the west coast of Florida, from Naples, Fort Myers, possibly as far north as Tampa, before impacting the Tallahassee region. And then we'll be watching closely as we look ahead to Monday night for impacts of this storm across the Atlanta metro, Columbus, Georgia areas, with the outer reaches of that storm back across portions of the Carolinas. Thanks so much for joining us for this Sunday morning update on Hurricane Irma. I'm James Brierton. Please stay safe, stay with the Carolina Weather Group for updates, and of course, if you are in the direct impact of this storm, our thoughts and prayers are with you, but also please be sure you have those battery-powered radios. Continue to get updates from your broadcast meteorologists and the National Weather Service via weather radios. We'll talk to you again in a little bit. Please enjoy the rest of your Sunday if you're watching from portions of the Carolinas or elsewhere, and of course, if you're in Florida, please do stay safe, and we look forward to talking with you all again here soon on the streaming networks, Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube of the Carolina Weather Group.